to adjust ourselves to the physical environment without destroying it. Why is it that, in a way, that this culture represents in a unique fashion the law of diminishing returns, that our success is a failure, that we are building up, in other words, an enormous technological civilization which seems to promise the fulfillment of every wish almost at the touch of a button. And yet, as in so many fairy tales, when the wishes finally materialize, they're like fairy gold. They're not really material at all. In other words, so many of our products, our cars, our homes, our food, our clothing, it looks as if it were really the instant creation of pure thought. That is to say, it is thoroughly insubstantial, lacking in what the connoisseur of wine calls body. And in so many other ways, the riches that we produce are ephemeral. And as a result of that, we're frustrated. We're terribly frustrated. We feel that the only thing is to go on getting more and more. And as a result of that, the whole landscape begins to look like the nursery of a spoiled child who's got too many toys and is bored with them and throws them away as fast as he gets them. Also, we're dedicated to a tremendous war on the basic material dimensions of time and space. We want to obliterate their limitations. We want to get everything done as fast as possible. We want to convert the rhythms and the skills of work into cash, which indeed you can buy something with, but you can't eat it. And then rush home to get away from work and begin the real business of life, to enjoy ourselves. You know, for the vast majority of American families, what seems to be the real point of life, what you rush home to get to, is to watch an electronic reproduction of life. You can't touch it. It doesn't smell, and it has no taste. You might think that people getting home to the real point of life in a robust material culture would go home to a colossal banquet or an orgy of lovemaking or a riot of music and dancing, but nothing of the kind. It turns out to be this purely passive contemplation of a twittering screen. As you walk through suburban areas at night, it doesn't matter in what part of the community it is, you see mile after mile of darkened houses with that little electronic screen flickering in the room. Everybody isolated, watching this thing, and thus in no real communion with each other at all. And this isolation of people into a private world of their own is really the creation of a mindless crowd. It is a basic premise of the culture that life is work and is serious. And herein lies its lack of joy. Life is real, life is earnest. What do we mean when we say life is serious? What do we mean when we differentiate work from play? Well, work, it seems to me, is what we must do in order to go on living, in order to survive. And play is pretty much everything else. But now you'll notice that in this culture, play is justified and tolerated insofar as it tends to make our work more efficient. We have the saying, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. But that really means dull at work. Play is recreation, something you do to get refreshed, to go back and face the great problems of life. The thought, in other words, that it is absolutely necessary for us to go on living is a basis for life which takes the joy out of life and is really contrary to life. This concept of man has very curious consequences. I've mentioned a lot of them, but one that strikes me more and more is that it's a non-participative conception of man. By that I mean, It causes us to feel ourselves as observers of life, whether that life is inside our own bodies or whether it's outside in the external world. We're observers. We are the subjects, and all that is the object. And that is to say, it confronts us. It stands over against us, and we're looking at it. And in a way, this is symbolized in our whole way of life insofar as its end and object seems to be to confront the television screen, which is non-participative contemplation of something which has been impoverished in its material and physical reality, deprived of, say, touch and smell and taste and so on. And so, because we have great expectations out of this contemplation, whether it be of television or of mundane existence, but we're not with it. You see, we don't believe we are our bodies. We say, I have a body, and we say, I have instincts. We never say, I am a body or I am instincts. And the bodies that we allow ourselves to have are a little bit pseudo. I mean, they're elegant surfaces. The ideal body is, Marilyn Monroe. It's an elegant surface, but it's not supposed to secrete sweat or tears. It's not supposed to smell at all. Its insides are rather improper, and one is expected to give it attention in a sort of aloof way, spend one's life, on the whole, being as unconscious of one's body as possible. All right, then, so we have a conception of ourselves which is estranged from our physical organism, and therefore our whole life is estranged. It is, as I've said, non-participative. If we got with ourselves and really admitted that we are organisms, we might also get with each other. Here again, I pointed out how little we actually get with each other. How in this television world, everybody stays at home, and if you walk out in the streets in the evening, police stop you and wonder whether you're crazy. Especially if you're not going anywhere, if you're just going for a walk, that's deeply suspicious. I mean, a person has to have a purpose, you see. He must be going somewhere. And so, we don't get with each other, except for public expressions of getting rid of our hostility, like football or prize fighting. Even in the spectacles one sees on this television, it's perfectly proper to exhibit people slugging and slaying each other, but oh dear no, not people loving each other, except in a rather restrained way. One can only draw the conclusion that the assumption underlying this is that expressions of physical love are far more dangerous than expressions of physical hatred. And it seems to me that the culture that has that sort of assumption is basically crazy and devoted. Unintentionally, indeed, but nevertheless, in fact, devoted. Not to survival, but to the actual destruction of life.